there needs to be space for people to voice concerns, but to actually log those things. Most people in an organization understand what's going right and what's going wrong.
There needs to be a leadership commitment from the very top that we will be open to feedback that comes from the open communication. Open communication goes both ways.
We all have those bad days at work. Do not take those single items as validation as to why you shouldn't be doing something. Just see that as the challenge as to why it's even more important to be putting those things in to support the organization become better. I think what we need to make sure we do as individuals within an organization is...
Luke, welcome back. We're here again for another podcast series. Today, we're going to be talking about norms. The normalization of the way that we work or the way that our organizations might work.
Yeah. Norms are one of those things, I think it's just like a slippery slope. We start somewhere, we do something slightly different. It works out. So we go to the next one and the next and the next before we realize it. This small incremental effect can take place where this minor normalization of this acceptance of a deviation can become a major issue in what we're doing.
So what we're really talking about is small steps away on a gradual basis away from working as intended.
Absolutely.
Okay.
When you think of the work that you do, if you were to start by saying, right, we're going to, car analogy, we're going to start driving at 30 miles an hour. Now I want you to do 55 miles an hour and a 30. It's a big jump, right? You notice that. That's not going to be something you're going to be particularly happy with. We start off with 30 and we go, well, that's okay. We're going to go for 35. It's actually, well, I'm a little bit late because I sit at 35 now all the time. We go, well, actually, I really need to get there. It's going to be 40. And before you just slowly creep up. And it's like the frog in a boiling pan of water. You slowly turn up the heat. You don't realize it's happening until such point as it's too late and the outcome's clear for you to see.
Yeah, very good analogy. So let's talk about the definition then of what norm is. The definition of norm is really all about the gradual acceptance of deviations from established procedures or safe operating procedure.
Yeah. And that is the idea, is this gradual acceptance, once again, of as a team or even as an individual, you have your own set of internal standards that you'll work to.
Yeah.
Those standards are, it's almost the DNA, it's what we are. They can be formed by those that we work with.
Yep.
We work with good engineers or good staff and they drive our standards up, and we work with perhaps people who maybe don't share the same standards. Yeah. That's something for organizations to watch out for, frankly. If you've got challenging people in an organization, you've really got to make sure that you can flush that out early doors. But it is that set of standards and how we slowly move and deviate away from them.
And when we talk about deviation, are we talking about necessarily the active deviation? So I'm consciously going to deviate. What are we talking about here? Is it always conscious?
No. It's not.
Okay.
And I think that's the reality of it, is that because these deviations are often caused by a whole other factors as well, that we can have complacency that creeps into there. There's a little bit of fatigue. There's a little bit of distraction that may be taking place. Each one of these factors contribute to our acceptance of this normalization of deviating from our intended path.
Yeah, very interesting. Let's talk about the normalization, or how normalization of deviance or deviation occurs then. So we've got incrementalism. We've talked about that. So in increments. Then what about lack of feedback? Because I know that we were considering that before we came on, about the role that lack of feedback plays when we're talking about this deviation away from standards and procedures within an organization. Give us some insights on that.
It's kind of human nature. If you do a job, you're looking for feedback. Did I do it right? Because most of us ultimately are making up as we go along and hoping for the best. It's that feedback which gives you the validation that what you've just done is right or wrong.
Yeah.
The problem is that as human beings, if we don't get that feedback, we can quite naturally lead into this world of going, well, actually what I've just done then hasn't been challenged. This must be acceptable. This must be okay. And that idea that we perhaps either knowingly or not so deviate from this process and procedure. And we do something and we wait.
Yeah.
Did anyone notice? Is anyone going to call me out on this?
Yeah.
No, they're not. Okay, well, I guess that's okay because there's been no feedback to say that shouldn't be the case. And the problem is that in the absence of feedback, we make up our own narrative that things are acceptable. That's what everybody's doing.
So you've just talked about it on a personal level. So if I'm not personally getting feedback,
Mm.
but what about the organization as a whole though? Because organizations can slip, organizations can deviate. How does an organization, what's the feedback loop from an organization perspective?
Ultimately, it's around external parties often coming in and auditing the
Okay.
organization.
Yep.
It's identifying that drift away from the intended process,
Yep.
which comes out as a result of audits. But also, the challenge with waiting for those things to happen is quite often audits are infrequent. Even on an internal basis, you'll quite often have somebody come and audit a particular topic once a year.
Yeah.
What about the other 364 days?
Yeah. Just gives a snapshot, really, doesn't it?
It does.
And usually we might know that an audit's going to take place. And I'm sure it doesn't happen at the people's organizations who are watching this, but maybe there's a little bit of a clear up and a reset that happens the day before. And then at the end of the audit, when they've left the premises and left the location, there can be this probably conscious slip back to how we always do things.
Yep. And that feedback loop, though, it comes from external organizations, but actually having the awareness that this can be a problem, it is where the safety reporting schemes, for example, are really, really crucial, because you're able to gather a live picture of what's going on day by day by every single one of us almost becoming auditors in the work that we do. Because by cross-checking what we're doing and noticing these slight deviations, we're able to pop them into the safety system as a hazard report.
Really good.
And that gives that eyes open to organizations who actually says, we weren't aware that we were starting to deviate from using approved tooling all the time because we didn't have the correct approved tooling. We need to nudge that back on track.
Great. So initially we started this conversation by talking about norms that weren't necessarily great. So deviating from procedure or process or regulation, and how normalization of this deviation can take place. Now we've begun to bring in the reason for the safety management systems, the SMS, certainly within part 145. So we talked about feedback that individuals might not necessarily be getting and the importance of getting feedback at a personal level. But we've now ventured into how an organization can ensure that the norm they have is actually a really good norm.
Yeah.
So I think let's just spend a moment just talking about that.
So I think, looking at that organizational requirement to actually feed back and feed into things is a really crucial part of this. The SMS process within an organization is crucial because there needs to be space for people to voice concerns, but to actually log those things. Most people in an organization understand what's going right and what's going wrong. And when people identify what's going wrong, if there's not a place for them to put it, it can very easily get missed. And back to that idea of there being a lack of feedback on this normalization slope, we've got nowhere now to put this thing that we've noticed. Now, there's no way we're getting feedback on that now because no one even knows about it. So it's collectively that we're all able to come together to actually highlight these deviations to get the feedback from an organization. But also it's important for organizations to realize opening this box is what needs to be done, but can be really uncomfortable. When you start receiving this feedback from people to say, actually, we're deviating here and we're deviating here, what do you do with that? Because a lot of people can perhaps become a little bit overwhelmed. The problem with overwhelm sets in. We then become busier because we've got more things to do. Got more things to do. We're slower to fix the problem. We're slower to fix the problem. Feedback that we come back to again slips back in. Well, actually, I put this issue into a safety system, 3 months ago, and I never had my manager come down and talk to me about it. I've not received any closure from it. That deviation must be acceptable by the organization. And it plays straight into the safety culture of that organization. And I think what we need to make sure we do as individuals within an organization is don't make up the narrative just on a lack of what you may see in front of you. I've worked with many organizations, as that you have too. Every single organization that I've worked with has always had that common theme of wanting to do the right thing and being good at it. There's no manager I've come across that wants to be bad at safety. But circumstance quite often tears them away from doing that. Don't let yourself fill that lack of feedback with a narrative that says that this organization doesn't care about safety, because in my experience, this couldn't be further than the truth.
That's really good. And often we've reminded people in class, if you take the time to submit an occurrence report or hazard report, and then because you've taken the time, you would like some feedback to say, hey, thank you so much. Really appreciate you submitting that report. Or oftentimes I might just get a message that says, thanks very much, it's been closed. And if I'm not careful, I can take that really personally, like, hang on a minute, I've just spent all this time putting this in and you've just come back and said, hey, it's closed.
Yeah.
What's the important message there though? Because I need to change my mindset. And I know we talk about this in class.
To me, you've got to change your relationship with the safety system. This is quite a bold statement, but so many people wait to put a safety report in until it becomes this big issue in their mind.
Yeah.
Change that relationship with it. And note, this is your scratch pad for things that go wrong. This
Yeah.
is the opportunity for you to go, okay, 5 things didn't quite go to plan today. I'm going to put those into the system. And, a 2-liner safety report that goes in,
Yeah.
actually, when that gets closed down as being trended, that doesn't matter. It took me all of 10 seconds to do it. That's the point of the
Yeah.
trend.
Okay. I see what you're doing.
You put it in more and more and more.
Yeah.
That trend genuinely shows the picture of what's going on.
Yeah.
If we hold the trend in our mind, I know that this has happened once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 10 times. Now I'm really frustrated about it. I'm going to spend a solid hour going and putting a safety report in to tell the organization what's happened. The organization, this is technically the first time they know about it. And actually, therefore, they will likely trend it because it's a one-off in the system.
Yeah.
Therefore, they'll close and trend it. And again, that disconnect between what we perceive versus what's actually going on. Change that
really
relationship. Use that as your scratch pad and just get it in.
Really good. Okay. Let's talk about the dangers of normalizing deviation then, and the norm that could come there. So we've got the erosion of safety margins, which is a big one.
So again, we have policies and procedures in place, and they've been defined because it's the safest way for it to be done. At least that's the way that it's been assessed. So every time we step away from that process and procedure, on the whole, it's taking us one step closer to the undesirable outcome that we want to have.
Yeah.
The problem comes is that, again, talked about feedback. When we don't get feedback of things being right or wrong based on what we do, that feedback can either be in the physical sense of a peer or an employee saying, actually, no, that's not right. You mustn't do that. But that feedback can also be what we see and what we feel.
Yeah.
We've deviated from a particular task by not using tooling or by towing an aircraft without having a wing walker. Now, we may not get physical feedback from a peer or a manager, but also when we don't get physical feedback of damage to that aircraft, or we don't put a task in the MEL or the tech log using the MEL, we don't get feedback there was no unsafe event on the aircraft. Maybe that's the feedback that we need. And again, we build that narrative.
Very good. And obviously that can lead to accident causation if we're not careful. And if you looked at accident reports or you've watched air crash investigation where maintenance has been involved specifically, oftentimes there will have been this drifting away from working as intended and working in accordance with. And then there's difficulty in detection because it's a gradual process, like you mentioned at the start. So we've got to be, again, it ties in with something we've discussed on another podcast about being mindful, being present in the moment with the task that you're involved in. And this ties in here as well, because if we're present in the moment and we're thinking, hang on a minute, is there any drift, so to speak, going on? Am I working in accordance with? It's so important.
Yeah. And I think it leads into this idea of how do we combat that normalization? And we've talked about a few tools there.
Yep.
The auditing is crucial, and it is a really important part. Be open with auditors. Make sure that you're frank about what's going on because it's there to improve you.
Yeah, really good.
That safety reporting process, again, is another way for us to identify that deviation.
Yeah.
And all of this feeds into effectively a safety culture within an organization which encourages this to happen.
Yeah, very good.
And again, I would encourage people just to remember we are genuinely all human, as is your line manager, as is the person dealing with this report. And sometimes they're going to get it wrong. Sometimes they're going to be overwhelmed with things and they're going to say things that give you a feeling that this doesn't matter always.
Yeah, really good.
Because that's what we do. We all have those bad days at work. do not take those single items as validation as to why you shouldn't be doing something.
Yeah.
Just see that as the challenge as to why it's even more important to be putting those things in to support the organization become better in those areas.
And that open communication is so important. Yeah. Obviously, training and awareness, and we go on training, human factors, maybe once every couple of years. And ultimately, leadership commitment. There needs to be a leadership commitment from the very top that we will be open to feedback that comes from the open communication. Open communication goes both ways. Yep. So we can't expect people further down the organization to be open with us if we're not open from the top down as well. We need to set the tone and set the environment. And really, it's about reinforcing those safety standards. So the people further down the organization need to be seeing the leaders not just prioritizing safety, but actually having safety as a value. It's a core value. It runs through everything we do as an organization.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, back to this idea, if you see your leadership team and you're thinking this isn't what I'm seeing, ask yourself, what are you seeing? And then ask yourself, do I genuinely believe that is the case? Do I genuinely believe that my leadership team don't care about safety? Because they might be demonstrating things incorrectly. What you need to do is you need to have that conversation with them about why it's important for you to see something different. Because by doing it in that way, it helps give that feedback to them really about the importance of prioritizing this stuff. The feedback is for everybody, not only us interfacing with the system, but for a leader actually coming back and going, did you know the way in which we had that conversation, I felt that it didn't prioritize the safety things that I expected you to because of X, Y, and Z. People 9 times out of 10, they really won't be meaning that stuff.
And a lot of it's usually about seeing it from somebody else's perspective by asking the open questions. Why do you feel like that? Or I'm just confused. Why has that been put in place? Or why has this new procedure come about? Or why are you asking us to do this? It's that understanding and seeing things from different people's perspectives.
Yep.
Amazing. Luke, great to have you on the show again. Thank you very much. And work safe, go home safe.